Thanks, Bill, and very, very generous. It nearly reads as if I wrote it myself, I've got to say. So, look, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My aim is to provide each and every one of you with at least one action item that you can go away with this afternoon and start implementing straight away. And whether that be improving talent attraction, making your selection processes more consistent, with regards to delivering future high-performing employees, reducing employee turnover and early failure rate, increasing employee engagement and performance levels, or improving leadership capability at all levels of the organisation, not just at the executive level. To help you start immediately, I'll provide you at the end of this with access to our resource centre, which offers a whole lot of fact sheets, templates, and a whole lot more. So if you leave early, you won't get it. If you stay to the end, you will. How good is that? That's an incentive for you. Right, let me share my screen with you. And also, hold on. And if you have any questions along the way, I'm happy to answer them as we go along. And sorry, I'm just getting rid of this. So please just ask questions as we're going along. If I believe that I'm going to answer it later on, then I may well defer it and we'll get to there. The war for talent is absolutely real, and fighting with outdated weapons is not going to win it for you. And the days of using just resume, interview, and references, it was ineffective decades ago, let alone now. And cutting corners using, keyword searches on resumes, I don't believe gets the best results either. I know it makes it easy for recruiters and HR people, but I don't believe it actually gets the best results, because I believe there's many great potential employees that don't even make it to the first interview. In some cases, they don't even get their resume looked at. And I believe there needs to be something that has to happen with regards to the unconscious and conscious bias that happens at the candidate screening stage, because I think it is a real problem and we're losing potentially great talent, and we all need really, really good talent. So the reality is simple. There's a huge amount of talent out there, but they are dictating who they want to work for. And you need to show them that you are a better place to work. So what I'm hoping as we go through this today or this morning is you'll be able to take some nuggets out of it that you can start implementing straight away. Because at the end of the day, the attraction and selection and onboarding of talent is a process. And if you follow a really good process, you should always end up with a very consistent and high quality result. Sorry, hold on. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to go through why the traditional recruitment process is broken, a little bit about what people analytics are about, understanding what the critical success attributes are of a role, which we believe is absolutely critical to having a consistent attraction and selection process. Targeted job advertisements, which are very much targeted towards millennials and Gen X, and the reality is that's all about 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. So I would imagine for nearly all of you, that is going to be the area that you want to attract people from, so from that pool of people. The first interview process, what I've found over the years is that hiring managers, they don't do enough prep when they go into their first interview, and it's more about whether they like the candidate, not whether the candidate actually fits the role. Effective coaching and mentoring. One of the challenges we have always had and will continue to have is when we promote people into supervisory roles and management roles, is we very rarely give them the training of how to actually manage people on a day-to-day basis. So we want to help them with that. And then the final part, which is really more advanced, which is helping organisations to be far more objective in the way they look at their succession planning within their organisations, and also the career planning of high potential employees within their world. So I won't spend much time on us because Bill's gone through it, but in essence, Peoplogica assists management teams and HR teams to maximize employee engagement and performance by setting up employees to succeed and providing managers with the information to make better people decisions. As for me, I'm very grey because I've spent decades assisting management teams to deal with their people challenges and helping them to maximise people outcomes. So that's what happens when you're in this world. So let's get into it. The reality is the traditional recruitment process, interview, reference checking and resumes, only delivers 26% of the relevant information about that person in that role. Inherently, 74% of the time, we just don't get it right. The whole part of selection, it's an information game. And the more objective and the better the information we have on the candidate and the role, then inherently we're going to make better decisions and we're going to be far more consistent. So what we're looking at is, and when we go to this next slide here, is if you ask any manager that has, employed more than 10 or 20 people in their management world, in their life, I guarantee you, they will say that if they put their hand on their heart, about 25% of their employees, of their direct reports, will be top performers. They will be people they would unreservedly re-employ tomorrow without a hesitation. 50% will be adequate to very good, so they're paying their way and up to very good, and 25% will be substandard. And I can tell you, plus or minus a few percent, that's what it is in every company, and so in nearly all companies, we're carrying a quarter of our workforce that aren't necessarily performing to standard. And that's something that is costing us a lot of money and translates into the engagement levels within Australia. So only about 20% of employees are fully engaged in the workforce. And engagement is used quite poorly by a lot of organisations. You'll see some survey organisations will come out and they'll report that that organisation has a 70% engagement level or whatever. I can tell you in Australia, the average runs between 18 and 25% of fully engaged. So they are the employees that on pretty well every day of the week is they give discretionary effort. That doesn't necessarily mean they're working lots of hours. They give discretionary effort. And that's what we want. Funnily enough, if you look at the 26% of the information we get from the traditional recruitment process, we look at what the managers are telling us of how many people are top performers, 25%, and then look at fully engaged, 20%. It's about a quarter of the employees match up. So what we're doing at the recruitment stage is flowing through to performance and engagement. So what we want to do is we want to increase by using science and using technology in HR. We want to start measuring fit, which is job matching. And that takes it from 26% to 75%. So is there anyone here at all who doesn't want to improve the way you attract, select and retain high-performing talent? I'd be surprised if there is, because we all want to get better. What we do have to do is we have to understand that HR is no different to any other part of your organisation. So in finance, in operations, in sales, we've taken technology on board for every other area of the organisation. For logistics, we take technology on board to make it better. For some reason, it's really hard for people to take technology on board for HR. And I think part of the problem is because we're all humans, we actually think we know other humans really, really well. And I've had, business owners who have been in the game for, 40, 50 years who will say to me, I can pick a fantastic employee when I see them. And you know what? They can't. When you actually go through and ask them how many of the ones you've employed actually turned out to be top performers, once again, it's about 25%. So a lot of people fool themselves. So what we want to do with this whole process is to provide a process that is far more consistent and far more accurate than using the traditional old-fashioned approach. So what are people analytics? Really, it's using people data to assist business owners and managers to make more informed and more accurate decisions about their human capital. It's as simple as that. The more information we have and reliable information we have, inherently we make better decisions. But the benefits are huge. So using targeted job advertisements, so taking the information from the analytics and putting it into the job advertisements, which I'll take you through, is we see about a 3 to 5 times increase in a number of quality applicants applying, which is massive. We see using high performance benchmarks and using psychometrics, we see a 200 to 300% increase in the success rate of recruiting a future top performer. Once again, pretty huge. And we have an average 40% reduction in employee turnover and early failure rates. And the reason we get all of that is because we're placing people into roles that they have fit for, they're actually suited to. And the last part, and I think one of the most important parts, is increasing leadership capability and developing confident people managers. There's the old saying, and I'm sure you've all heard it, is people don't leave companies, they leave people. And they leave managers. So the more effective we can make their managers and the more capable we make their managers, then you're going to have less attrition of employees. There was a recent study that just came out from Gallup, and they found that if somebody has respect for their manager in their organisation, it takes a 20% increase in their salary for them to even consider moving. So if you've got somebody on, take a nice round number, someone on $100,000, then if they're working for an organisation and they respect their manager and the manager has really good leadership capability, they will not even consider leaving until they're offered over $120,000. If ever you wanted to understand the benefits of developing leadership at all levels, not just your executive level, everybody invests in the executives, but it's the mid-level managers and the supervisors that have all the people reporting to them. And so if ever you needed a reason to invest more in your managers, your supervisors and mid-level managers, that's got to be it. So high performance role benchmarks. My belief is you cannot even go out and look for the candidates you want unless you know what you're looking for. And most people, when they're putting out their job ads, essentially, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, they essentially get their position description and ram it in. For most recruiters and most internal HR people, the least amount of time they spend is on the attraction process. They just don't put the time into it. What we advocate is the first thing you have to do is you need to understand what are the attributes of a top performer in the role that you're recruiting for. And those attributes, we look at their core, hardwired capabilities, so their cognitive abilities, their behavioural traits, and their interests, so their passions. So the 3 areas, and which is really their heart, mind, and soul. So the resume will provide the learnable skills that you need to have for the role, but this next level provides the type of beast that we're looking for, the type of person. And my best way of explaining why this is so important is, I'm sure a lot of you have had it where you've been in the position, or you know someone in the position where they have poached somebody from another organisation from the same industry, so a competitor, and they're a high performer for that competitor. They bring them into their organisation and they don't measure up to what you thought they were going to be and what you thought they would do. And the reason for that is the environment, the culture of the other organisation could be very different to your culture, very different to your management style. And therefore it takes different attributes to thrive in that environment. So we've got 3 ways of doing it. You can be totally subjective, which means you don't need any of the tools that we're talking about, either from us or other people. And the manager or managers estimate what the abilities, behaviours and interests are So they look at existing high performers in the role and they try and identify what abilities they have, what their behaviours are, and what their interests are. The second way is we have and I'm sure others do as well, a job analysis survey, and that helps you to refine exactly what the abilities, traits, and interests are for the top performers for the role that's required. However, the most accurate way, and the way that essentially gives you the absolute roadmap for what you want for the role, is by being able to extract the success DNA out of your existing high performers. You know, everybody says, if only I could find another girl like Betty. You know, Betty's an absolute champion. But they don't know what it is about Betty that actually makes her a champion in the role. Whereas by assessing existing high performers, and it doesn't matter what role they're in, and it doesn't matter whether you've just got one person or you've got 10 high performers. So it could be a sales role or it could be a lawyer role. It doesn't matter. Is by assessing your proven top performers, you can scientifically extract their success DNA, which is their core hardwired behaviors. Incredibly powerful, and I'll show you that. So this is what we do. So we look at the thinking style, so the cognitive abilities, the behavioral traits, and the occupational interests. And you can see here, so this is a high performance benchmark. So there were 5 high performers. And if you look at the learning index there, you know, 2 of them were a 6, 1 was a 7, and 2 were an 8. So if you see the little green numbers above the graph. And what we're looking for is, what are the critical success attributes? What are the attributes that top performers all have in common? So if we look here, where we're looking at the definition for us of a critical success attribute is any attribute where over 70% of the high performers are essentially the same within a block of 3. And we generally find for every role, there's somewhere between 5 and 12 or 13 critical success attributes. This here, if you look here at this business manager role benchmark, for the first time ever, and we find this with all of our clients, for the first time ever, they truly understand what it is that makes a top performer. So in the case here, when you look at accommodating, so it is somebody that is a little bit more my way or the highway. There's someone who will dig their heels in when they passionately believe in something. They'll fight the fight, you know. And the high assertiveness is that they will readily have those difficult conversations. You know, they will, what I affectionately call, they will lean into the pain. So all of these areas, and we won't go into what all the stats are, but there's some really important parts of it that gives you an incredible insight into the way someone thinks and the way they behave. Because at the end of the day, it's all about behaviours in every role. It's all about behaviours. And these benchmarks also take into account the culture of the organisation as well. So it's the role and the culture. You know, probably one to point out here, which I think is a really important one, because it's ones that all of us as people, either personally or in business, get very frustrated with, is the decisiveness and objective judgment and how they play out together. So objective judgment is how we make decisions. Decisiveness is how quick we make them. So if we're on the left-hand side of the scale for objective judgment, we're a gut feel decision maker. We're a more emotive decision maker. We're on the right-hand side of objective judgment. We're a highly objective decision maker. We don't make decisions based on our feelings. And then decisiveness is how quick you make a decision. So if you have someone in this case where their decisiveness is higher than objective judgment, they will make very timely and fast decisions because that's what the role requires. Whereas in other roles, the decisiveness may be lower than the objective judgment because you actually want them to hold off and be more considered. So it just depends on the role that you're in. There's no passing or failing in this. What you are is what you are. Importantly is the interest as well. So it's based on Holland's theory of occupational interest, but what it does is it identifies the passion that people are, so what they enjoy doing. Because we know, and we've probably been there ourselves, is you can be really good at a job, but if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it well. And so this is very important. So it's the 3 parts, the heart, mind, and soul. So once we have that benchmark done, that gives us the information we need to develop what we call a targeted job advertisements. Traditional job advertisements, and be interesting to see people put up their hands whether this is the way you do it, is they generally have a paragraph about the company and how good the company is, the position description rammed in to the middle of it, so what you're going to do for the company, and then the last part is how you apply on the company's terms. Everything's about the company. And you know what? We now have two generations called the millennials and the Gen Zs. And while we were, as baby boomers and Gen Xers, while we were sold on the light at the end of the tunnel, they're sold on the light at the start of the tunnel. And they're very, very different to us. So the traditional job advertisements, because it's all about the company, it doesn't answer the one fundamental question that they want answered, which is what's in it for me? You know, other than the salary, that's all it's got of what's in it for me. And the salary is always the third or fourth thing in everybody's list. There's far more important things than that they concentrate on. So what we do for targeted job advertisements is we still have the paragraph about the company because that's very important. But then instead of putting the position description in there, because the reality is if you're advertising for, let's say, a vet nurse, because I know we've got a lot of veterinary practices on the line, you don't need to put in there what a vet nurse is going to do, because I think they have a pretty good idea what their job is going to be. But what we put in there is what they're going to love or what they're going to hate. So it would have in there, you love helping people, it might be things such as you don't like people looking over your shoulder and you don't like being micromanaged because of someone who's very low in manageability. You are, highly optimistic and highly resilient because you're high in attitude. So we take all of those attributes, and it comes out of one of the reports, and that allows us to put together a job ad that actually talks to the heart of the person, not just talks about what the company wants. So it's actually what the person's going to get out of it. And what we find is because we're actually telling them what they're going to get out of the role, we have that 3 to 5 times uplift in the number of quality candidates applying, because they select themselves in and select themselves out based on what the job ad is doing. More importantly, people will look at it and go, well, I never thought about being X, a salesperson in whatever industry, but that's me. So maybe I should have a look at this because they relate to it. Does that make sense to everybody? Yep. So the first interview process, and I'll give you access. We've got an online hiring manager guide that has a whole lot of stuff in here. The first interview process is unbelievably important, and it's important for a lot of reasons. One is the psychological contract, for those who don't know what the psychological contract is, the psychological contract is the contract that's made between the job applicant and the company, and essentially it is essentially the truth of what they're being told and what they absorb through the whole recruitment process, so that if they're successful and they get in the company, it's actually true. Because how many times have you all had it where you're told stuff during the recruitment process because they want to employ you, and then you get in the company and it's nowhere near what they said it was going to be. They make promises they don't keep, and they say things that aren't actually true because they're trying to sell you the job. Does that resonate with people? So the psychological contract is really important. Is you have to maintain the honesty of what you're telling the candidates on the way through. The second part is, which we tell our clients all the time, you're not there to sell yourself. You're there to find out whether the candidate is going to be your next future top performer. It's not about selling yourselves. When they ask their questions and the way you provide your answers, that will be how you sell yourself to them. But the process on the way through is to find out whether they will be top performers. And it's certainly not about finding out whether you like them. It's not about them being your next best mate. So part of that process is everybody, no matter who the company is, no matter how big they are, no matter how small they are, you should have a range of first interview questions that you ask everybody. And it doesn't matter which role it is. Now, they may change in, depending on your industry. But there's two questions that I don't think it matters what industry you're in and what you do. I think they're two of the most valuable questions I ask every first interview. And the first one is, tell me about the best manager you've ever had. What was their name? What was the company they were, what was the company you're in? And what were the 4 or 5 things that you respected most about them? And then they'll give you all the answer. Then you ask them, you say, now tell me about the worst manager you've ever had. I don't need to know their name. I don't need to know the company, but what are the 3 or 4 things you didn't respect about them? In those 2 questions, you will find out to a very, very confident degree what type of manager they want, so how they like to be managed. So you'll find out very quickly whether they don't like being micromanaged. You'll find out very quickly whether they need a lot of support, because I'll say, the best manager was one, always had an open door policy. I could walk in there and ask anything I wanted any time, blah, 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 blah. And then the ones they hated were the ones that didn't give them time. Now, if you're recruiting for a role where you need them to be highly autonomous and look after themselves because the manager doesn't have time to spend on them, then you wouldn't be going forward with them, because the manager's not going to have time. It's not going to work out well. So there's a whole lot of value that comes out of that. And the other ones, and we'll give you access to all these questions, but what you want to do in the first interview as much as possible is to get as good an idea as you possibly can about the type of person, because the other part of the first interview is proof testing their resume to make sure that everything they say in their resume is right, of which over 70% aren't, because over 70% carry blatant lies or untruths in them. So you've got to work out what's true and what's not true. So very important process. What we then do for then the next part of it is all shortlisted candidates are then put through a psychometric. And as we were talking about the benchmark before, so we already have the benchmark. So what we're able to then do is actually measure the candidates against your top performers, if you've used top performers to create the benchmark. So you're not just measuring them to an office administrator role, you're actually measuring them to an office administrator that you know is fantastic. And that's a very different world. So this is not about using, a global library of benchmarks, because averages of averages do not work. This is about having benchmarks that are for your organization, because you're all slightly different. You all have different management styles, you all have different environments, you have different cultures, and that needs to be taken into account. So what these reports very quickly do is, one, they give you a percentage fit to the role. They identify any potential barriers to success. So that's those yellow numbers outside of the benchmark. And so they're the areas that we need to make sure that we're on top of. And then also in it, you can see on the right-hand side, it then provides tailored behavioural interview questions to drill down in those areas to see whether the person either can flex, because what the assessment does is measures their hardwiring. So whether they can flex, or as a management team, can you provide the environment for them to actually flex across? Because the one thing I can tell you is, if it doesn't work on paper, it's certainly not going to work in 3D. So getting it right here is really, really important. And then a big part of whether you use, analytics or you do it yourself, is you need to provide your operational managers with coaching and mentoring suggestions on how they coach and mentor every one of their direct reports. So we work on that. If they have, up to 6 or 7 direct reports, then the employee action plan that you have, and there's a template that I'll give you for that should have 3 or 4, coaching and mentoring action items for the manager for them. If they have more than that, so particularly in contact centers and things like that, it might be just 1 or 2 per person. So you use the number based on how many direct reports they have, because managers don't have a whole lot of time. So in here, we use the analytic because it provides suggestions on how to actually better mentor, how to coach, and in some cases, what training is required to help them be what you want them to be. Which then takes us on to the leadership side. And one thing I'm really passionate about is that it's great that we spend so much money on executive leadership development, but I think it's a real travesty that some of that money or other money is not put into mid-level management and supervisors. And as I said before, the vast majority of all of your employees report to mid-level management. They don't report to executive managers if you've got large companies. And yet we give them very few things. So we have a couple of options. One is an individual leadership report where it provides to the individual an insight into what their potential strengths are and what their development areas are, their challenges, and allows them to go through the report for them to put together a leadership action plan, which you'll get the template of at the end. The other report, which we find is one of the most powerful team leadership reports, is a team leadership report that has this balance table in it. So it actually shows where every employee is and maps out every employee in the team to where the team leader is. And it absolutely opens the eyes of the team leader of their responsibilities for the entire team. Because one of the biggest challenges we have is most managers just treat everybody the same. And the reality is you can't do that. Everybody needs to be treated differently. They need to be managed and coached and mentored differently to extract out of them the highest engagement levels and the highest performance levels. This here as well, this one page here, this is all about ensuring your organisation that people don't leave. It's too hard finding new top talent. The more you can retain your top talent, it's got to be worth spending money on. And I'm sure whenever somebody loses a top talent, if you said to them, would you have invested $5,000 3 months ago to make sure that didn't happen? They would all absolutely say yes. And yet they don't do it proactively. And it's too late once they've gone. And it's certainly too late, we're talking about it in a breakout group. When somebody hands their resignation in and you then offer them more money, that says a lot about the manager, and because they've just missed it, and I think that's just poor leadership when you do that. The other side we have is for succession planning and career planning, which I think is going to become far more important. One thing that we know about millennials and Gen Nexters is they like to know what their options are going forward, and to tell you the truth, I don't have a problem with our young executives and young employees being pretty bolshy about what they want in the future. In fact, I think it's really good. I think it's really refreshing. But we need to get out in front of that, and we need to show them that we are putting their interests as a key part of the development going forward. So what we do with the analytics is once we have roles benchmarked and once we have people assessed, we can pull out reports that, an example would be you've got a 27-year-old, employee in the business that has real potential. Imagine where you can actually put them against every role in the organisation to find out what fit they have for all the different roles, all the way up to CEO. And they may well be at the moment in the sales department, but you may find that they actually have a really high fit to the marketing manager's role. It's then a discussion of what do they need to do to prepare themselves to get to the end of the diving board, so that in 5 years' time or whatever is when that opportunity comes up, is they can then go into marketing. So you actually manage them and you retain them within the organization because you're developing them. And one thing employees love is when organizations are really proactive in developing their employees and giving them a roadmap and a vision of where they could be. And then the other side is the career plan, the succession planning, where you may have a manager that's leaving, and generally what happens is people only look at the people who report to that role instead of looking at across the whole organization. So this allows you to look at everybody against a particular role. So just pretty handy piece of analytics that you can use.
Mark, can I just butt in for a quick question from the floor? Yes. Just thought I'd bring it to your attention. It's when do you think businesses, it's from Ivan Ang, when do you think businesses should engage external coaches versus developing coaching abilities in leaders?
I think the answer is it depends on the capability internally that an organisation has. So if an organisation internally has exceptional coaching capability, that's great. But there is no doubt, depending on the role and what the person has, is external coaches, the thing that they do bring is independence, and in a lot of cases courage, where they can say things and do things and grease the tracks for people that internal people can't do. And so for external coaches, they sometimes, in fact most cases, have a capability of getting more done with the person going forward. But there is two sides. You know, we want to get internal managers to be mentoring and coaching their people. When it gets to more strategic leadership coaching, then generally you'll always need an external person.
Thanks, Mike. I'm hoping that answered it, Ivan.
So really, in summary, there's a couple of things that I think for us that are key. Is the high performance role benchmarks, we just believe they're critical for selection and retention, because if you don't understand what attributes are required, then how can you possibly get the best people in the first place? The targeted job advertisements, we know, dramatically improve the attraction, especially of millennials and Gen Zs. And we have to change the way we do job ads. You know, most job ads are pretty boring when you look at them, and you've got to be different now. And you've got to think, not just default to Seek or whichever one you are, and think about where you're going to put a job ad. Where are people going to be looking? The type of person you're looking for, where are they going to be looking? You know, one of the things that we do for our clients when they're looking for senior roles is we will put a job advertisement either in the Age or the Sydney Morning Herald, but not where all the jobs go. We put them in the first 7 pages of the Saturday paper, because the people we're looking for some of those roles are not people who are actually out of work or looking for jobs. They're not looking on Seek. They're not looking on any of those places. They're not looking on LinkedIn, but they do look at the Saturday morning paper. And so we're trying to capture people that aren't necessarily looking for jobs. And, you know, it all comes back to this war on talent. We've got to think outside the square. You know, depending on your industry, depending on your organisation, is you've got to think outside the square. You've got to beat your competitors, which are the ones in your same industry, and in some cases other industries. You know, if you're looking for people for customer service roles, then, you know, the reality is part of the target market, unfortunately, could be for the not-for-profit industry, because they have a high customer service and people service attributes to those roles. So we've got to think outside the square. Interview guides, however you do your interviewing, you've got to stop your hiring managers hiring on like. They've got to hire on fit, because hiring on like just doesn't work. and we know it doesn't work. It's not consistent. Maintaining the psychological contract is critical. Getting your managers to not embellish and exaggerate the benefits of working for the company is really, really hard. But you've got to get them to stop it. Because now, especially with the young people coming through now, is they will be in the job for a month, and if they see that it's a lie, they will bail. Early failure rate will go through the roof. They won't stay around, especially in a talent short market. They know they've got options. The importance of providing effective coaching, mentoring, and training insights from day one. You know, most managers will start to get a feel for their direct report when they get about 6 months in, and the probationary period's finished, and they start getting an idea of what they can do. You need to do it from day one. They need to be coaching and mentoring from day one. And that's part of the onboarding process as well. Develop the leadership capability at all levels, not just the executive level. And develop effective and objective instead of objection, succession and career planning processes. So they would be, you know, the 7, I think, most important areas. So to access all of the fact sheets and templates, and there's also an online hiring manager guide in there. If you go to peoplogica.com/resources, or just go to peoplogica.com and go to the top right of the screen and click on the resources, you'll find there's a whole wealth of tools in there for you to use.